Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
I am Shelley. I'm one of the co-founders at Jiminny. My role has changed considerably over the years. Right now, I'm responsible for revenue. So I'm looking after really the customer journey from entry all the way through to becoming a client and on the client's life cycle. So end to end is where I've moved to most recently.
Doing all of the things.
Doing all of the things.
So we've recently kind of launched a campaign about pipeline leakage, and I'd love to know, what does pipeline leakage mean to you?
What does pipeline? For me, it simply means to lose a lead, an opportunity, or let's just say somebody from the pipeline, whether that's in the lead or the op phase, that we shouldn't have lost. So I guess what I'm saying there is, you know, when you're looking at your funnel, unfortunately, there's no such thing as 100% conversion rate from start to finish. If only. Life would be so much easier. Maybe not quite as fun though. But the idea is that you understand that from entry point through to close, what your metrics are, your funnel metrics. And if you're losing more than you would expect to, the gap between what's expected and unexpected for me is where a leak is happening or a problem's happening that you wouldn't expect to. I think there's always pipeline leakage. There should be, you know, because nothing's perfect. And so if you think that you haven't got it, then you're just not looking hard enough. If you're constantly iterating your sales process, you are opening up for problems, right? So therefore, you've got potential leakage. If you are bringing new people into your business, then you're opening yourself up to leakage, and because those are both risk factors. So I think it's naive to say, oh, we've never had a pipeline leakage or we've only had it once. I think it will be happening right now, and it will always happening. It will just shift. So it's almost like, you imagine it's a great big pipe of water and there's splurts coming up. Some of those splurts are bigger and more powerful than others, and you're just constantly trying to put your attention and plugging the right gaps.
So is there any kind of standout moments that you feel like in your journey at Jiminny, like there has been kind of major leakage, and, you know, how has that been an issue?
Yeah, I think one of the most obvious ones to me was actually when we set up our BDR function. So the leakage was actually around making contact with someone, finding out, for example, that it's not the right time for that person, and then instead of nurturing that lead, that contact properly, just almost ignoring it, not having a good plan, and then the potential for that has completely leaked out of the funnel.
Right, okay.
And on my reflection now, when I look back at previous sales leadership roles that I've done, I've definitely made that mistake in the past as well. I think the difference here was when I first started to understand that whole process for us, we're in a fairly competitive market. So when we do make contact with someone, there is a really good chance, at one point around a 50-50 chance, that contact was already in contract with another provider.
Right.
So the key thing then is, okay, that is a really useful piece of information.
Yeah, of course.
We want to make sure that we are going back and getting back in touch at the right time. Now, if you're not doing the work and you haven't got the processes behind that, you're just missing out on that opportunity. And I think the biggest frustration is that now more than ever, the effort that it takes to actually get hold of somebody and get their attention and connect them with you and your brand, to then not ever follow up in the right way is such a it's such a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, of course, it's all the hard work that goes into it. It just doesn't make sense, does it?
And I think a big part of that comes down to mindset of leaders, mindset of people, because we are always chasing now. You know, today's KPIs, this month's target, this quarter's target, and the issue with a nurture, you know, oh, call me back in 9 months is
that's way off.
Yeah, you know, the sales leader's not going to hit their op number with that, and the BDRs might be thinking, well, I ain't going to even be here in 9 months, you know, and that's another consideration that you've got to build into the picture is, you know, yes, you want to try and create some kind of longer term mindset within your team, which we did a few things to help with, but also you want a process there that is supportive for a ever-changing team so that you're not losing the groundwork.
Okay, that makes sense. Just on that, actually, I'd be interested to know, so obviously, you know, we both know that BDR teams do change often, so what would be the process that you'd put into place if you kind of, you know, if you are tracking those nurture accounts and then people leave, how do you go about picking those up for the new person that may join?
Yeah, so the simple answer to that was in much better reporting, right? And tracking of next activity that's required. So if I just take you back a step to what we ended up doing, and again, this was another mindset shift, because I'm sure there'll be people listening to this that can also relate to, oh, it's a nurture, let's chuck it into an automated nurture stream. And again, the thought process for me was, well, hang on a minute, we've just spent, again, all that time getting to that point of connection. Why wouldn't we continue to develop that in a much more personalised way? So the first part of that was, okay, we aren't going to just automate every touch point. That's a nice thing to do, but actually we're going to, based on the time frame between now and when we next reach out to them, we're going to pick a cadence that seems like a good, appropriate amount of touch points between now and then. So the cadence was the structure.
Yeah.
But the touch points that were in that were completely personalised, completely bespoke, based on what we'd learned about them and the company and new features that were coming out, and being able to really tailor that message. So I think that was an important thing, and that really fed into the mindset of the BDR, because, you know, they still had ownership over that account. I think on top of that, we created a nurture target. So if you hit your nurture target, you're rewarded there in the same way that you can be rewarded for
that's really nice.
Booking a meeting. Well, that's right. And then it ascertains to the fact that we know that, you know, 30% of our nurtures ended up becoming a meeting at some point in the future.
Yeah.
So that's what we expected, and that is exactly what we saw. Every single month you go into the month looking at your potentials for where the meetings are coming from, and the nurtures for that month are in there, and they're managed as part of the pipeline conversation. And again, that was another sort of thought process change for our BDRs. It wasn't all about activity. It was about, you've got a pipeline, and where that pipeline is there, that nurture pipeline, to help you hit your meeting targets and your up targets. So it became a lot more structured and a lot more organised. And then in terms of managing that with change, if you've got someone like Mike Richardson in our team, who's more recently gone from a BD into an AE role, he's started those connections with those nurtures. He carries them into his new role. The relationship is always queen. So that carries on moving over for him. And then if somebody new was coming in and somebody was leaving with that space, we can simply pull that list up. Everything is there as part of the process to make sure next steps, the nurture cadence is in place, and we can pick that up, and we can very easily transition that into the name of somebody else.
Okay, that makes sense. It's quite nice. It's kind of sowing the seeds for a garden that you'll get to appreciate in 6 months, 9 months, a year.
Yeah, and that's that thing about mindset. Again, you know, is
patience.
Patience. Well, that's one of the things. I know we talk about the skill of a salesperson, and we talk about, you know, the importance of determination and, you know, being resilient and organised. Now, I think it's really important given the workload. But I think we talk less about patience, and I think the way things are and how challenging sales can be now, patience is huge. You know, if you can't have everything tomorrow. The tipping point was looking at the volume of activity that was happening every week. And bearing in mind, I'm talking now to when this was a reasonably new team, the volume of activity that was happening and the conversion rate between the activity and the meetings coming out the other end, which was really low at the start, way under what I would expect at maybe 1 or 2%. So when you see that, you're like, okay, well, if that's the output on the meetings, what's happening within the other buckets? You know, what's happening within the not interested?
It's not translating.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to look for the contacts that we've made, the contact we've made, and what the key things are that are happening within that contact. Now, nurture was huge. You know, there was just a huge amount of nurtures coming out of our connection rate, and so that makes you go, right, oh wow. So it's not that we've got a load of people just not interested, but we've got a lot of people that aren't ready to talk to us right now. Why are they not ready to talk to us right now? Okay, 50% of them are already in contract. What are the other reasons? Budget, things going on within the economy. Right, we've got two situations here. One, budget, timing issues. Let's look at training, see if there's any way that we can improve our talk track. But with the nurtures, which we can't do a huge amount about right now because of competitor agreements and contracts and things, how do we really maintain that relationship? So all of a sudden, what felt like oh God, all of this work for nothing, actually felt like, no, it's all of this work for growing that future garden, like you mentioned.
So you kind of discussed how you went about kind of fixing the problem. What teams were responsible within that?
So that was predominantly the BDR team. Because that's where the ownership was. Obviously, unless it then moved over into, they moved and transitioned into an A role. Having said that, though, I'm a really big advocate of working as a team, and for the BDs to work alongside the AEs for, you know, if it's nurturing, that change of voice, you know, getting them in, those sorts of things I think are often thought about much later down the pipeline. But, you know, I don't know what to say to this person. I've already messaged them 3 or 4 times. Well, okay, what could we do with bringing Nick into the equation? Because Nick's actually worked with a company just like theirs and understands, you know, so I think there is a joint responsibility with every single account that you're working and looking after. But in terms of the actual protecting that nurture pop, that was a BDR responsibility. Okay.
And if there was any, I'm not sure if you did, but what tools did you use?
We're just using the key tools that we use. So we use CRM, and we use Outreach, our cadencing tools. So all of the tracking and reporting of activity and steps and things were in Salesforce, and then the actual cadencing sequences and everything were set up in Outreach. So
I guess reporting was the most crucial there, really, isn't it?
Yeah, our reporting in Salesforce was really important in terms of making sure that we could see what those nurtures were each month that we needed to approach.
And how are things looking now you've kind of identified that and you took the steps to kind of fix it?
Well, when we did make these changes, obviously because we're talking nurture here, so it wasn't overnight, but what I can say is that as things progressed, and I'm thinking about a couple of the people that were in the team most recently, you could see that 50% of their meetings booked each month was coming from that nurture.
That's really nice, getting the fruits of their labour, really.
Yeah, and I think, again, you know, it's different when I'm standing in front of them maybe 8 or 9 months before and I'm saying, you know, I know you're probably already dreaming about your next gig, right, and whatever you want that to be.
I'm sure they're not.
But, you know, at the same time, this gig is actually not going to reap you the rewards for another year.
Yeah.
Because all of the work you're putting in now is going to pay off then, and then for another 6 months after that, a year after that, you know, there's so much value that can be had by just really focusing in on that that job, that time, that skill set, and really developing rather than thinking I'm going to do this for 6 months and then I'm out.
Yeah.
You know, so that definitely seemed to come true in the results that we saw. Almost thinking about pipeline as an everlasting thing. And what I kind of mean by that is, you know, yes, there's pipeline within the lead stage, and yes, there's pipeline within the opportunity stage, but actually there's pipeline in the customer phase as well. And I suppose that's probably the natural evolution of how my role is changing as well. But pipeline of opportunity, things, you know, if you get a customer and you're like, great, 1 year contract, signed, sealed, delivered, and you feel a sense of security in that, then that's where apathy creeps in. Whereas if you constantly see that as your pipeline to protect, I think it changes how you behave.
Yeah.
Because, well, and I suppose this is a way that I always look at pipeline. The mentality for me with pipeline is, where's the risk? You know, when I'm looking at deal reviews, it's great, I get they love it, where's the risk? Why wouldn't they buy? And it's the same, and that's a sort of way of thinking for me is continued now into the client cycle. Great, they're using it, they're adopted, why wouldn't they renew?
Yeah.
You know, where's the risk? So I think for me it's just continuing that thought process and not taking for granted that there couldn't be a leak anywhere at any point across the whole cycle.
For sure. And so what would you recommend to other people facing pipeline leakage? I know it's quite a broad topic, but, you know, would you kind of have any recommendations that are feeling these things?
I think probably my recommendation when it comes to pipeline leakage is to just have really, really good foundations. So here's what I mean by that. First of all, have your process mapped out, have a really clear definition. Right. So it's amazing how many people, and if you're listening to this now, you'll have an opportunity definition.
Yeah.
Ask your marketing team what it is. Ask your BDR team what it is. Ask your sales team what it is. Right. I'll give £100 to anyone who can tell me that it is completely aligned across the three groups.
Yeah.
And the same for every bit. The minute you're not clear on definition, you've got a problem.
Right.
You've got to understand what each part of the process is and means. And then, as I mentioned right at the start, you've got to understand what your expectations are at the point of design. Because if you don't have that, then you don't know what you're kind of comparing it to. Now, if you're right at startup phase, then the best thing you can do is use benchmarking and best guess judgment. But if you're more developed and you've got previous data to go on, then that's brilliant. You can use that. Beyond that, my final piece of advice is not to rely too much on averages. So whilst you build this whole thing based on averages, it doesn't actually tell you anything when it comes to pipeline problems. So a really good example of that might be we, in our funnel metrics, have a conversion rate of 30% from opportunity to close one. But actually, when you break that down by segment and you start to look at SMB, mid and enterprise, that conversion rate can change from 15% all the way up to 60%.
Right.
And then that can really feed into what's happening on an individual level within those win rates and conversion rates. So that's my probably third and final piece of advice is dig.
Yeah.
Don't stick with the top line average. Look behind those averages. How much further can you keep cutting up the data to really understand where the problem is? Because that surface level only gets you so far.
Yeah, I suppose the more you can drill into the data, like you said, the more you're going to find out.
Totally, yeah.